definitely you want to be able to have full sun for your sunflowers. There's a reason why they're called sunflowers, because they really do worship the sun. In terms of fertilization, you can do a side dress, or you can do a slow release if you wanted to. You could do a side dress when you started. We did a liquid fertilizer of 20-20-20. I recommend any 1-to-1 ratio of NPK. We were fortunate, I've read on the mainland that they have to fertilize these pretty heavily, but we laid down a 2-inch layer of compost before we planted, and then hit them with the 20-20-20 when they were about a foot tall, 6 to 8 inches, and we didn't need any other fertilizer other than that. You can see they get plenty tall. You don't want them too tall, or then they're really hard to harvest, especially for cut flower. And you don't really want them to put too much energy into the leaf production. What you want to do is for them to put it into the flowers. So I would monitor, depending on your soil type. Both watering and fertilization is really going to depend on what your soil is. We have a sandy clay here, and like I said, we found that we only needed to fertilize at the beginning. But depending on your soil, you may have to fertilize more, or and also, have to monitor in your watering schedule with that. Okay, so the other thing that I was looking at that I was interested in growing sunflowers here is on the mainland. You can maybe grow them. Mostly they grow during the summer. They're in most of the parts of the U.S. you can't grow them during the winter, right? It's just too cold. But they're experimenting with trying to grow it in the south during the winter time. But they found that there's definitely some distinct differences, especially in the height of the plant and the performance of the plant, that it's just not as strong in the winter as it is in the summer. So I was trying to discern how it would respond here in Hawaii, because in Hawaii we don't have the extreme long days and the extreme short days that they experience on the mainland. And what we found is it's been kind of inconclusive as to what their response is in terms of stem height. It's more of an environmental. So if it's been really rainy or we've had cool temperatures, that's what they're more going to respond to rather than the time of the year. Up in Kula, it was a little bit more extreme. Like I said, just very variable in how the cultivars responded. And so for me, it's a lot of teasing out to see what was it? Was it just a lack of light, or was it the fact that it was, growing up in cooler temperatures? The seasons didn't seem to have as much as an impact, other than in our winter, we're going to get maybe more rainy days, right? But for this one, we planted this in February, and we got those 2 or 3 weeks of rain, remember, just back in March. And so we were really worried about these guys, if they were going to make it or not for this demo, if they were going to flower in time. But they do come back. But they kind of hunkered down for a little bit when it was raining and when it was cloudy. So that seems to me to be more of the factor of how they're going to do well here, is more about their light requirements and how cloudy and rainy it is, rather than the time of year. I personally feel that if you wanted to grow sunflowers year-round here, you could. You would just want to have a nice rotation, and I wouldn't try growing sunflowers continually in the same spot. I would rotate it, because you're growing a monocrop. Even though you're attracting beneficials, the insects are going to find it, and so you want to kind of keep those insects guessing. You could try intercropping it with something else, but just realize that this is going to get this tall within 50 days. So if you're growing another cash crop, it either needs to be after that or before that. Otherwise, it's going to get shaded out. Let's see, we talked about pests. So some of the other pests and diseases, they do get powdery mildew, and they do, they do get chomped on by some beetles and grasshoppers. But overall, the product that we're trying to harvest is the flower. And so really the only thing that concerned me was if something was affecting the flower bud, because most of these leaves you're not going to keep anyway. You're going to discard, and you can compost, or you can use it as green manure. So really, it was mostly the sucking insects because they can cause the deformities in the flower heads and and in those leaves up at the top. So those, to me, I would say are the ones that you want to keep in check. We did notice, and I see that it's starting here. There's these symptoms of this mottling. I don't know if anybody can see that on the leaves. There's like this splattering of kind of whitish, light green mottling. We think it's a virus, but I have to confirm it. It's shown up in each of our trials, both here in Kahului and in Kula. It doesn't seem to affect the flower production, though. It appears to happen on the older leaves, not as much on the younger leaves, and it usually happens to the cultivars that take longer to produce a flower. So again, the idea is if you can get a cultivar that's going to produce a flower fairly quickly, you can, avoid a lot of the problems that might happen with diseases and pest pressures as the plant continues to grow. But we're going to continue to monitor that and see if we can figure out what's going on with this mottling here on the leaf. Okay, so weed control standard. If you're growing a crop, you don't want weeds because weeds compete for resources. They can also harbor pests and diseases. I love the weed mat. If this is a crop you think you're going to grow on a regular basis, I would invest in the weed mat and use a template and burn some holes in it. We've reused these weed mats 2 or 3 times now. So and they're still good. And then we just run the drip underneath. You can also plant these as a row crop, and so it would be up to your farm and your growing conditions as to how you would want to grow them. But I like the intensive bed culture because you can use this weed mat and you just grow them right in the holes, and then it's easy to take out once you've harvested in your POW. So the last thing that we're working on is the vase life for these guys because, these are really attractive flowers, but what we really want to find out is how early can you harvest them, right? And how early can you harvest them and still get this full flower? And what we're already finding is that if you harvest, I have a picture of it, just when the petals are starting to emerge, I'm wondering, we have some, we're calling it our A treatment, but just when you see the petals are starting to emerge like this, you can harvest it, and you can, it'll open up, and that's really good because that's gonna, give you, it takes about 2 days to open up to about a semi-full flower, and that's gonna give you an extra 2 to 3 days that you can harvest. And you can stick in the refrigerator. They'll keep in a walk-in, or if you have a refrigerator. And then you just want to make sure with sunflowers that you're changing the water and using clean water. When you cut them, there's like this oily kind of residue, not residue, but it's like when you cut the stem, it exudes from the stem, and it can breed bacteria and other things. So I recommend that when you harvest them in clean buckets with clean water, and then when you're going to vase them, or if you're going to take them to your wholesaler or to your florist, that you change the water out again and you recut them, and then just to keep it clean, because the water can get dirty fairly quickly. But we're excited that you can harvest it at that stage because it's going to give you that extra time that you can harvest, and gives you that flexibility to harvest earlier if needed. Of course, you can also harvest when the petals are kind of out perpendicular. After that, you can still harvest them, but they're going to decline fairly quickly once they reach this full bloom. I would recommend that if you're going to grow the sunflowers and you have some that you've missed, or for whatever reason they're in full bloom, just take them to the farmer's market, because at that point they're still going to last in a vase, but they're not going to have the vase life of those that you've cut earlier. So yeah, in terms of, I guess, talking about the cultivars here, our Full Sun improved. This guy he was bred for the South. I called it a guy. Probably because he's tall. He's taller than me. So the Folsom Improved is a later, you can see it hasn't bloomed yet. This is one of the later bloomers. It does have your classic sunflower look though. It's got your orange-yellow petals with your dark brown center. And it has a nice stalk. I picked it because it is bred for the south for the more warmer, more humid environment. So it's very robust. The only thing is it's a later bloomer. So if you were planting this, you might want to have another cultivar that's going to go earlier so that you have something to sell before, this can take up to, maybe 60 days. So we're just looking at a slightly longer harvest time for the full sun. Okay, then we have the Pro-Cut Red. We actually have some Pro-Cut Reds back here. They're very attractive. We get lots of compliments on that Pro-Cut Red. The one caveat with the Pro-Cut Reds and any sunflower that has that different color, that has the red in it or even the bicolors, is they tend to not last as long in the vase. So their petals will drop sooner than the yellow ones and the orange ones. And that's probably just a fact of the breeding, that when they introduce those colors, that's one of the things that's a trade-off, is the longevity of the petals. So if you're going to grow Pro-Cut Red, I really encourage you to harvest them early, in that really early stage, because just a little bit of knock on the flower, you knock those petals off, and then, once you lose that symmetry on the sunflower, it just doesn't quite sell the same. So Pro-Cut Red, though, it's a stunning flower. Has a good height on it, a good stem, but it is a little bit more, it needs a little bit more care. Pro-Cut Plum is one of my favorites. There's also some Pro-Cut Plum that we have over there. This one is a fairly new cultivar, released in I think it was released in 2017. It's very attractive. It's got the yellow and pinks. What I have noticed with this cultivar is that it'll vary in the degree of pink and purple in it. So some of them have been more dark, and then others have been more yellowish tinge. So you might get a mix, and if that's okay with your florist, I mean, they're still very attractive, but they're not exactly uniform in how they come out, but they're still very attractive. And these were very robust, also very resistant to aphids. In the one trial that I did, they were planted right next to Sunrich Orange. Sunrich Orange is an older cultivar, and it just got hammered by aphids. The aphids didn't touch the plum. So, I guess the aphids like the Sunrich Orange over the plum. But it is pretty robust. Double Quick is a one of these kind of doubled or tripled petaled sunflower. Do we have any Double Quick out? I don't think the Double Quicks come out yet, because they're a little bit later bloomers as well. But again, another kind of unique coloring. It's got the light center with the double petals, so it gets really fluffy, and it just continues to get fluffy as the flower matures. So this one in our vase trials, we're still trying to figure out when it peaks, and when would be the ideal time to harvest this, because the flower changes as it matures, and it depends on what your florist is going to want to put in their bouquet, because as it ages, even in the bouquet, the flower is going to continue to get fluffier and fluffier as those internal flowers also start to put out petals. Then you have the Sunrich Orange. This is another standard. Like I said, it's an old cultivar. It's been around for a while. It has a beautiful orange color and that dark center. And what, the key with this cultivar is it's early. This one comes out early, and like I said, it's just your standard sunflower look, and it's early to harvest. One of the caveats with the Sunrich is that I have noticed it's more susceptible to pests and diseases, but I did notice that they have different Sunrich oranges. They've now bred one that's resistant to downy mildew and might be resistant to some other things. So if you want to do Sunrich Orange, I would just make sure that, look in to see how it responds in your fields, and then if you need to get a different cultivar, you can. Pro Cut White Light. This is also another new release. I think it came out in 2017. This is the white sunflower. This is one of those cultivars that I think they keep improving it every year. When we first planted it, I was getting a lot of defects. So I was getting flowers that weren't developing as well. And I noticed the stalks just weren't as healthy. And this year when we planted it, it's doing excellent. It's doing really well. And it actually did really well up in Kula in our last trial as well. So I think they've improved the line and they've made it more robust. And so it has this really nice light petals. If you walk over here, we included in our demo, we have a white night, and that was just released this past year. That is like the white light, but instead of the light center, it has a dark center. And we haven't done any trials with it yet, but I wanted to plant it because I wanted to see what it was going to look like and how it would compare to the white light, because it's another option you can include if you're growing for the cut flower, is to have a white mixed into your, cultivar selection. And white could be really popular with weddings here and other celebrations where they would like that kind of more white flower. Sunrich Gold is probably one of my favorites just because it's a very dependable cultivar. It blooms early and it has that yellow on yellow, and for me it just stands out. It's pretty disease resistant, and it just has a really pretty color. And overall, I've just found that if you're gonna plant anything, try the Sunrich Gold, because you can't miss out with that Sunrich Gold. Really good flower, and really I just haven't had any problems with it. Okay, Pro Cut Lemon, another favorite. That's this one right here. It's got these kind of more rounder petals with the darker center. To me, I just can't help smiling when I look at it. I think it's also a really good cultivar to try if you're gonna start with sunflowers, just because it has a different look to it and it stands out from the rest. This cultivar, we did notice it tends to be a little bit shorter. This height is okay, but when we grew it before, it was even a little bit shorter. So this is one you're going to want to watch and probably definitely want to fertilize, because otherwise you may not get enough height on it. You want at least, right, you want to be able to harvest them at least at 24 to 36 inches, so that you can then have room to trim the stems when you're selling them to the wholesaler or to the florist. So that's would be my only concern with this guy, is sometimes the height has been inconsistent. But other than that, I think it's a great cultivar. Let's see, and then our other one is the Starburst Panache. This is another double. So the only issue I have with the Starburst Panache is that it's a bunching type. And what we found with the bunching types is that unless you're committed to growing the bunching type for a lot longer in your field, you have to basically either decide that you're going to go for the single flower and pinch off all the side shoots, or pinch off the top when it's really little and then develop those side flowers. You can see it how it's branching there. Because if you want to get some decent flowers from the branching, you're going to have to prune off that head fairly early, the main one. So, but it has a very attractive flower. I think there's some that are definitely mature down there. You can see them, and they kind of look like a dog who's put its head out the window with its ears flapping behind it. They kind of push out and they get kind of fluffier and fluffier. But so definitely a unique look, but the bunching habit is something that you want to consider. And then lastly, but surely not least, is our bicolor here. Also very attractive to me, reminds me of fall. It's got that fall look to it. Like Pro Cut Lemon, it's got more of those rounder type petals. And again, this one, just like the Pro Cut Red, you have to be really careful. Those petals will drop off, so you want to harvest that one early. Oh, I didn't want to forget about Jade. Jade is on the side. poor Jade. Jade just didn't do that well, and we had mixed success with it. I wanted it to succeed because it was supposed to be like a pale green colored sunflower. But we actually talked to the grower not too long ago, the guy who breeds the seed for this, and it wasn't only us. They said they received a lot of other complaints from other growers that it just wasn't a, you know, it just didn't produce very well. So he tweaked it, but he didn't let us know. And so this is the new Jade that you see out here, which doesn't match our picture. But it actually, to me, looks like Pro-Cut White Light. It's just on a shorter stem, and it's a bunch type. So I'd go for Pro-Cut White Light probably over the Jade at this point. It is a very early bloomer though. This is our earliest bloomer. And it's short. It's very short. So that is my presentation for today. Any questions about